Hey, Crimestituents. Before we gavel in, I want to address the elephant in the room. Yes, Sarah is no longer a host of your favorite podcast, Crime in Congress. I'm really sad to see her go because I had so much fun creating this world with her. But rest assured, this is not some Alex Cooper, Sophia Frankel breakup. We are still friends. I'm still going to her wedding. And I still appreciate everything she brought to this podcast and community to help get it off the ground. While we are sad to see her go, we are going to, like the queen bee herself, make some lemonade. So in addition to having one host, we are also going to be rolling out video, which if you're watching on YouTube or the Spotify app, you're already seeing. Hello. And we are going to... Hold on, I need a drum roll for this announcement. Start publishing weekly sessions. That's right. I am going to be in your ear every single week, giving you all the hot goss about things that happened years ago in politics, but your history professors forgot to tell you. I also have plans to bring in guest hosts, and we have officially launched the website, crimeincongress.com. Please check it out if you haven't already. And don't forget to rate the show 5 stars wherever you're listening, because I don't get paid for this, and so the ratings help out a lot. I'm going to take a pause so you can go quickly rate this show 5 stars. Okay, Crimestituents, I have just thrown quite a bit of news at you, but all of this is really just to say thank you for listening and for sticking with me through this interesting period of growth and transition for the Crime in Congress community. Good things are happening, and I am so glad that you're along with me for this admittedly crazy ride. Without further ado, hey, I'm Harley, and it's time to gavel in another session of Crime in Congress. Lynn put on a floral dress and slipped a small silver crucifix around her neck before tossing on her long red robe. Now at the age of 26, she had what she only dreamed of in her childhood years: freedom and belonging. One of those would be gone by the end of the day, she thought, as she tucked the .45 caliber gun with an 18-inch barrel into the belt fastened to her left calf. Lynette Alice Fromme. A lot of people don't pronounce the E, but according to her biographer, the E is not silent. Was born at 5:37 a.m. on October 22nd, 1948, the oldest of what would be 3 children, giving her both a brother and a sister. Born in the Santa Monica Hospital to parents William and Helen Fromme, she grew up in Westchester, California, which is described by author Jess Bravin, whose wonderful book I read for this session, as a, quote, model post-war development. Basically, it was quintessential 1950s suburban America. Today, this is a solidly Democrat seat, but according to Bravin, at this time, it was Republican territory through and through. Those values didn't necessarily vibe with Lynn's more free-spirited nature, but it didn't stop the community from falling in love with the young child. She was carefree, connected to nature in a unique way, and had a general wisdom about her that usually only comes with age. She seems like the kind of person who truly would light up a room when she entered. She paired her red hair and freckles with an infectious spirit and love for animals, which played into that general connection to nature that I talked about earlier. Lynn was also a natural performer. She was a triple threat: dancer, singer, and actress, and could captivate a crowd with her talents. It's no surprise then that she joined the prestigious dance troupe called the Lariats, which toured the country and even made stops in Washington, D.C., with the Lariats performing at the Watergate Theater, which, for those who don't know, the Watergate Theater used to be where the Watergate Complex is now, which you know of because of the whole Nixon scandal. And it actually went over the Potomac River, which is pretty cool. they also performed at the White House. Just that small little shack. Vice President Nixon was supposed to meet them personally, but scheduling changes pulled him away, which is a tale as old as time up here in the Capitol. They were still given the VIP treatment, though, which is pretty cool. Lynn was the star of the group, took all the big solos, and while it did make some people very jealous of her, it didn't stop her from giving her all to the art of dance. This isn't at all relevant, but I just wanted to throw it in there. One of the dances in the group's repertoire was Three Blind Mice, performed by Lynn and two of the other standout young ladies. Despite sounding as innocent as it comes, it would end up ruffling a few feathers for, apparently, teaching young kids to embrace socialism. It's not quite Miley on the Wrecking Ball level scandalous, but for the time, I guess it was close. Outside looking in, Lynn might have had the perfect American family. Her mom stayed home with the kids, and her father worked as an engineer in the defense industry, which was a staple of California's economy at the time. They had the single-family home, the car, the house in the burbs, the 2.5 kids. They were living the picture-perfect American life. The reality, however, could not have been more different. Her father was a cold and angry man who took his own frustrations out on the very people he was supposed to love and protect, in the forms of, unfortunately, physical, verbal, and emotional abuse. No one was spared from his wrath behind closed doors, but when it came to Lynn, he was extra harsh. She quickly learned how to cover up her bruises and physical markers of abuse from her peers, including the wounds she inflicted upon herself. Like, the control and abuse was so bad that when he went out of town, he would take all of the money with him, so his wife couldn't even purchase groceries, and would mark down the odometer on the car to make sure she didn't drive further than he had pre-authorized. Insane and scary behavior. He clearly felt powerless in his own life and needed to take it out on people he saw as weaker. Often described as a shy child, that didn't stop Lynn from continuing to dominate the stage. She loved performing in the school theater arts club, often getting important roles and building a reputation of standing out among her fellow classmates. Folks would say that if she had more supportive parents, she could have made it in Hollywood. She was that good. In high school, which Lynn entered in 1963, she would gain another reputation for herself. And unlike many a reputation built in high school, this one was positive. She was an impressive poet, even among the older students, and contributed the lead poem to the school's annual publication. Drawing her inspiration from poet Dylan Thomas, one of her poems went, and I'm going to do my best to do it justice here. Quote, "Down the space caged me there, the succulent red I could not touch, but up, jump, flop, grasp the air, pull myself out of dry, stale gray." I think if she were a teen in the 2000s, she would have been the kind of person to pretend like she was too cool for Taylor Swift, but secretly love her. Evermore actually for sure would have been her album. And I don't know why I'm acting like she's dead. She's very much alive, so we could probably just ask her. But I have no way of reaching Miss Fromme, so for now, my musings will have to suffice. But, Lynn, if you're listening, let us know. What is your favorite Taylor Swift album? Because I know you have one. While Lynn had the potential to be exceptional in several ways, her home life held her back significantly. After moving school sophomore year when her family moved to Redondo Beach, she missed school a ton, turned to drinking, and was often kicked out of the house after fights with her dad. Her personal life was mainly a mystery to her friends. They knew her dad was someone to avoid, but when it came to where she slept or who she was dating, question marks remained, and people were almost too scared to ask. Put yourself in a teenager's shoes here. Lynn is this artsy, cool girl, and her friends didn't want to seem lame for sleeping at their parents' house and not dating and doing all of these very healthy, normal things that Lynn just wasn't afforded the opportunity to have. But when she did open up, she left those around her stunned. One time, she revealed to her friends that she was just sleeping down by the beach with some guys at night. Like that's no big deal. Another time, she told her friend that she and her dad had gotten into a fight and that he wasn't speaking to her anymore. Like any good friend would, this friend assured her that he would come around and everything would be fine. To which she replied, and I'm quoting from Bravin's book, quote, "The fight," she said, "had taken place 3 years ago when she was 13. It had ended," Lynn said, "with a pronouncement from her father, 'You're not part of this family anymore.' Despite living with his daughter, he went 3 years without speaking to her." And when asked about her mother, she told her friend that she was forbidden from talking to her as well. Can you imagine? Bravin writes, her mother occasionally gave her money, but increasingly Lynn had to support herself. Her attendance at school was inconsistent at best. She found jobs here and there to support herself, but because she was a troubled teen, she was never able to hold anything down for very long. Eventually, she would move back home, but it was anything but peaceful. A detente with her father was never reached, and she would end up getting kicked out of the house again. This time, it seems, for good. She had no one to take her in and nowhere to go. Lynn was truly alone. She hitchhiked to Venice Beach Boardwalk, where at just 18 years old, she would find herself crying on a bench, unsure where her next meal was coming from or even where she'd spend the night. Because of her being 18, she only brought mascara, a dictionary, and books with her. I honestly love that mascara made the cut, but frankly, it's stressing me out that she would have no way to wash it off. Now at the age of, I think I'm 27, I would prioritize the face wash and lotion over the mascara because sleeping with mascara on alone would just send me over the edge. Suddenly, a man's voice broke out behind her. "What's the problem?" "How do you know?" she shot back, which is such a teenager response because you think you're so mysterious and misunderstood, but in reality, you're just basically a child crying on a bench. Like, clearly something's wrong. "Up in the Haight, I'm called the gardener. I tend to all the flower children." "So your father kicked you out?" he said knowingly. Something about this man made Lynn feel like she could open up and tell him about her life, which she did. "The way out of a room is not through the door. Just don't want out and you're free," he said. "You're welcome to head north with me," he invited as he turned to leave. Lynn thought about it for a moment, but since she had nothing else to do, she grabbed her books and hurried after him. "I'm Lynn," she said. "I'm Charlie," he said back. Charlie Manson. For those who don't know, Charles Manson was a criminal cult leader who ran a cult based out of California in the early 1960s. His very first member of the family, as it was called, was a woman named Mary Brenner. When he ran into Lynn on the street, he was actually fresh out the slammer and was in the area looking for a job to get his parole officer off his back. Lynn joined the Manson family so early on that it wasn't even called the Manson family yet. She was referred to as one of Charlie's girls. She quickly fell in love with him and adopted his message of spreading love to all. Sometimes, oftentimes, in the most literal of senses. They soon grew to more than a dozen strong and were identified by their long hair and frequent nudity. A report on the family entitled The Group Marriage Commune, a Case Study, describes the family in this way. Approximately 20 members of this commune, 14 of whom were women, referred to themselves as a family, but we have chosen the term group marriage commune because of their practice of polygamous sexual relations. The group was distinguished by its spiritual leader, a father figure Charlie, a 35-year-old white male with a past history of nonviolent criminal activity. He was an extroverted, persuasive individual who served as absolute ruler of this group marriage commune. Tales of Charlie's sexual prowess were related to all new members. Charlie had a persuasive mystical philosophy, placing great emphasis on the belief that people did not die, and that infant consciousness was the ultimate state. However, Charlie's mysticism often became delusional, and he, on occasion, referred to himself as God, or God and the devil. Charlie could probably be diagnosed as an ambulatory schizophrenic. I'm going to keep quoting from this report because it puts the commune more succinctly than I can, so bear with me here, y'all. Quote, Charlie set himself up as initiator of new females into the commune. He would spend most of their first day making love to them, as he wanted to see if they were just on a sex trip or whether they were seriously interested in joining the group. The females in the group had as their major role the duty of gratifying the males. This was done by cooking for them and sleeping with them. Eye roll. I added the eye roll. That was not part of the quote. And I know that was a lot of information, but basically the family was a cult with a capital C, and Lynn was Charlie's favorite and one of the group's ringleaders. Through orgies, acid trips, a huge emphasis on environmentalism, anti-Vietnam War rhetoric, and lessons on ego death, Charlie pulled Lynn more and more into his world until she was convinced that they were one in the same. Charlie also warned of helter-skelter, which he believed was an impending race war that would lead to the downfall of society. Throughout her time in the family, Lynn would be arrested multiple times, usually for grand theft auto, and would bounce in and out of jail, usually not staying booked for too long. In fact, it was a source of frustration for the local police because charges against her and other family members just never seemed to stick. The group is most infamously known for the Tate LaBianca murders, charges that did stick. And Manson himself would be responsible for the death of 7 people in total. But Lynn was not part of that case. I don't know whether she had any involvement, but legally she didn't. During the trial, Lynn and other Manson family members would carve X's into their foreheads, ouch, as a way to show their solidarity and unity with Manson. The scar would end up being a defining characteristic of Lynn for the rest of her life because, of course it was. How many people with an X-shaped scar do you see just walking around on a daily basis? I'm going to guess 0. When Manson and other family members were eventually charged with murders, which they very much did commit, Lynn was forced to lead the family while Charlie was behind bars. By this point, she was going by the nickname Squeaky, which came about in a disturbing way. An old man named George, who Lynn cared for and on whose ranch the family stayed for a while, gave her the nickname after she squealed when he ran his hand up her thigh and pinched her. Gross, right? She also had another nickname that Charlie used that I like a lot better. Red, after her red hair. Pretty straightforward. While family members were in prison, Lynn also became the spokes for those incarcerated, and the media ate her up. Which makes sense because of her whole background as a performer. She knew how to captivate a crowd. Charlie and the arrested Manson girls would end up being sentenced to death, since California had not yet outlawed the death penalty. That would come a year later in 1972. After the guilty verdicts, in 1971, the family took stock of where they were. Their ranch had burned down. No one wanted anything to do with them anymore. And their recruiting and sales of Charlie's music, which was a major source of income, were in the toilet. That's when Lynn decided she would write a book about the family. They also decided it was time to strike a partnership with the Aryan Brotherhood. Lovely, right? Lynn completely threw herself into her novel. Between visiting the various people who were in jail, being booked herself multiple times, launching a vicious legal campaign to get access to Charlie Manson, he was being blocked from visits from any of the Manson family members, and running what was left of the family, Charlie's world was Lynn's world. She had no life outside of being one of the last remaining Manson girls. From inside prison, Charlie continued to share his revelations with Lynn and expected her to enforce them from the outside. He was also getting increasingly crazier, if that's even possible. For example, one of his new doctrines required that Lynn and Sandra, who was a close friend of Lynn and one of the other dedicated Manson girls, stop eating meat, don't smoke, and never wear makeup. This alone doesn't seem like it would have been too much of a stretch, since I believe they were mostly following those rules anyway. But he also required that for ceremonial occasions, they wear hand-sewn traditional nun clothing in their corresponding colors. Red for Lynn, blue for Sandra. It's giving Handmaid's Tale. He also started to require specific prayers and started to exert more control and restraints over the women's sex lives. Charlie was their god and their lover, so they listened. Lynn was radicalizing alongside her god, and she was about to make a name entirely for herself. She saw what, in her view, was the wrongful imprisonment of the Messiah, something she was powerless to stop. She saw the devastation of the Vietnam War, with boys being sent to die for what she viewed as a tyrannical cause. She saw environmental destruction, too, from pollution to the destruction of the California redwoods. And Lynn felt as though the government was ushering in this environmental crisis and had neither the will nor the desire to do anything to stop it. Her communal lifestyle had also been ripped apart by the same government that was causing everything I just mentioned. And Lynn was tired of feeling powerless. She was tired of the family being held accountable for following God's word, while the rest of the world committed violence and destruction with zero accountability. It was time for someone to pay for the crimes against humanity, and Lynn was prepared to take her gripes straight to the top. On September 5th, 1975, President Gerald Ford, who had assumed the post about a year earlier after President Nixon resigned due to the Watergate scandal, was making an official visit to Sacramento, California. This was a big deal because Sacramento didn't get a lot of high-level visitors, especially not presidential visits. Described as a, quote, once-in-a-decade event, the entire city seemingly readied for his arrival, with school children even hoping, adorably, that he would make a stop by their house. From the sounds of it, it seems like they were getting ready for this visit the way cities got ready for the Eras Tour. Oh, I'm sorry, are you sick of the Taylor Swift references yet? Well, too bad, because I have a reputation to uphold. Lynn was among those readying for the presidential visit, and she had big plans to welcome Ford to the Golden State. Standing in the bathroom in her red cloak, Lynn loaded her massive gun as she pondered what to do with it. After admiring the weapon in her hands, likely realizing that its barrel held multiple people's futures inside of it, she dislodged a bullet onto the floor before camouflaging the gun beneath her ceremonial gown. She then made her way to Capitol Park, where a crowd was gathered to watch Ford as he made his way to the State House. The crowd was massive, but Lynn managed to push her way to the front. Her outfit made her stand out, and several people remembered thinking her odd and out of character as she paraded through the stream of excited citizens. Lynn found her ideal spot on the east side of the street, beneath an elm tree in the front row, and patiently waited for Ford's arrival. As Ford exited the hotel and began his fanfared walk to the State House, Lynn said to herself, "He is not a public servant. I'm a public servant, and I'm doing what I am supposed to do." Lynn confidently made her way towards the president, described by Bravin as looking like a, quote, elf in a flowing headdress. Unperturbed by her presence, can you imagine someone being able to just walk up to the president in a crowd today? No way. But Ford assumed she just wanted to shake his hand and turned to face her. She raised her right arm, but not for a handshake. Instead, she held in her palm a loaded gun pointed squarely at the commander-in-chief. Suddenly, Ford was terrified of the elven woman who seemed so harmless just seconds before. Lynn fingered the trigger, putting just enough pressure to send a bullet barreling towards the most powerful man in the world. But nothing happened. Before she knew it, the weapon was ripped from her hand, and armed security descended upon her as she wailed, "It didn't go off! It didn't go off!" Her attempt to assassinate President Gerald Ford had failed. Now, some people think she never actually intended to kill Ford, which is why she dislodged the bullet at home, and she was saying it didn't go off as a way to tell Secret Service that they were overreacting. I tend to think that she didn't understand fully how the gun worked, and her pleas with Secret Service came from a place of shock and disappointment. I think she loaded that gun because she wanted to kill the president. Lynn was arrested and charged with attempting to assassinate the President of the United States, a federal offense that brought with it the potential of life imprisonment. This, for obvious reasons, became a media sensation, and Lynn was well equipped for making and keeping headlines. During her trial, she wore her ceremonial bright red robe and would ramble on about all of the Manson family's views, continuing to profess her love and allegiance to the family. She even threw an apple at the judge, but much like her failed assassination attempt, missed. Oh, she also insisted on representing herself in court, which is an infamously great way to land yourself a guilty verdict. Despite her outburst and generally insane behavior, she was deemed competent to stand trial, which I agree with. That was the right call. And after only a few hours of deliberation, on November 19th, 1975, Lynette Fromme was found guilty of attempting to assassinate the president and was sentenced to life imprisonment with, importantly, the possibility of parole. Even at her sentencing, she showed no signs of remorse and was described by the prosecuting attorney as, quote, full of hate and violence. During her sentencing, she said, quote, "The government is killing my air. I have to do something about the air. Trees are dying. People are dying. Everything is being turned into garbage. I want to live, and I want to live in a healthy world." Lynn would maintain her allegiance to Manson even from behind prison walls. In 1996, she wrote a letter that read in part, quote, "I am in prison basically because of what friends of mine did. We all stood air, trees, water, and animal in its most natural bundle called life on Earth. Did someone say Delulu?" She would bounce around different prisons, and at one point ended up at federal prison camp Alderson in West Virginia. If you've heard of it before, that's because it was nicknamed Camp Cupcake, because it's supposed to be one of the nicest and easiest going prisons in the country. It's actually the one that Martha Stewart went to, if that tells you anything, and I haven't watched it yet, but supposedly she talks about it in her documentary, which I've also heard is really good. I am actually shocked, though, that a would-be presidential assassin was sent there. She wouldn't be there forever, though, because at one point she managed to escape. She wanted to go see Charlie, and obviously she couldn't do that from a cell. After 2 days on the lam, she was captured once again and sent away from Camp Cupcake to a facility in Texas. Then, after serving a total of 34 years in prison, Lynn would actually be paroled on August 14th, 2009. I am shocked that she got parole after her crime and attempting to escape prison. But that's exactly what happened. She ended up publishing her book, entitled Reflections with an X, I'm assuming because of the X on her forehead, and lives in New York with her boyfriend Robert Waldner. She continues to pledge love and allegiance to Manson to this day, though she maintains a much quieter public profile. Her neighbors describe her as friendly and say she mostly keeps to herself, although they did note that her house is ramshackled and decorated with skulls. And that, my friends, is the story of Lynette Fromme, a Manson family member and would-be presidential assassin who escaped from prison and managed to shock the world with her wild outfits and even wilder stances, which she was willing to fight for to the bitter end. And with that, will you all help me gavel us out?